Can a love story told 35 years ago still touch hearts today? Pretty Woman wasn't just a movie, it was a moment. And now, that moment is returning. Before you watch Pretty Woman 2, you need to understand why the first movie became a legend. It's more than just a romantic comedy. It changed lives, made stars, and turned a simple story into Hollywood history. Let's go back to where it all started. Asterisk in 1990, the world met a man in a sharp suit and a woman in thigh-high boots and fell in love with both. Pretty Woman told the story of Edward Lewis, a rich, lonely businessman, and Vivian Ward, a street-smart woman living a hard life and loss. Angelus. When Edward hires Vivian for a week to be his companion for business events, he doesn't expect her to change his life. But she does by being exactly who she is, kind, bold, funny, and real. The movie wasn't supposed to be a fairy tale. In fact, the original script was much darker, but director Garry Marshall turned it into something magical. He brought humor, warmth, and heart, and that's what made the film special. It wasn't just about money or looks. It was about how people can surprise you and how love can find you in the unlikeliest places. Julia Roberts, who played Vivian, was just 22 years old at the time. This role made her a star overnight. Her laugh, her smile, and her natural charm lit up the screen. Critics called her the new face of Hollywood. Audiences couldn't get enough. She wasn't just playing a character, she was Vivian. And the world loved her for it. Richard Gere, already a known actor, brought something different to Edward. At first he's cold and distant. He sees people as numbers. But slowly, through Vivian's kindness and honesty, he begins to open up. You can see the change in his eyes, in his voice. He learns how to care, how to feel, and most of all, how to love. That transformation is what made his performance unforgettable. The chemistry between Gere and Roberts wasn't just acting. It felt real. They laughed together, argued on screen, and shared quiet moments that felt genuine. That's why the movie still works after all these years. It wasn't fake, it felt true. It reminded people that love doesn't always follow rules and that's okay. Garry Marshall's direction made sure the film stayed light yet powerful. He balanced serious themes with playful moments. He showed us Beverly Hills through Vivian's eyes, a world that judged her at first, then had to accept her. One of the most famous scenes, where Vivian returns to the fancy boutique after being rejected earlier, became a symbol of self-worth and confidence. Big mistake, huge, she says. And audiences around the world cheered. The music also played a big part in the film's success. Roy Orbison's song, "Oh, Pretty Woman," wasn't just background, it became the heartbeat of the movie. Every time that song plays, people remember Vivian's walk down Rodeo Drive. They remember the red dress, the opera scene, the final kiss in the fire escape. These weren't just scenes, they became pop culture treasures. Financially, the movie was a huge success. It earned over $460 million worldwide on a budget of just $14 million. But more than the money, it gave people something they could believe in. At a time when many love stories felt unrealistic or forced, Pretty Woman felt fresh and exciting, and the impact didn't stop in 1990. For decades, fans have talked about Vivian and Edward. What happened after the credits rolled? Did they stay together? Did they marry? Did Vivian follow her dreams? These questions stayed in people's minds, and that's why a sequel became a dream. Many never gave up on. Hollywood tried many times to capture that magic again. But none of the follow-ups or similar movies ever quite matched Pretty Woman. The unique spark between Julia and Richard, the tone set by Garry Marshall, and the fairy tale set in the real world, it was one of a kind, even in interviews years later. Julia Roberts said that Pretty Woman changed her life. She didn't just play Vivian, she grew through that role. And Richard Gere admitted that the film made him believe in romantic storytelling again. Garry Marshall, who passed away in 2016, often said this was the film closest to his heart. Now, with Pretty Woman 2 arriving in 2025, that legacy is returning to the spotlight. It's not just a sequel, it's a tribute. A celebration of a film that reminded people that love can start anywhere, that everyone deserves to be seen, and that even in a world full of money and power, kindness and love, still matter most. The legacy of Pretty Woman isn't just in its lines or outfits. It lives in the hearts of those who watched it and felt something deep. It taught us that no one is beyond love and everyone deserves a second chance. And now, that message is coming back to the screen. Asterisk, they said it would never happen. The director is gone. The stars have aged. The moment has passed. And yet, Pretty Woman 2 is here. But how did it even get made? After 35 years, Hollywood didn't just make a sequel. They resurrected a legend. And the journey to bring Edward and Vivian back wasn't easy. It was full of silence, heartbreak, secret scripts, and one emotional promise that changed everything. This is how Pretty Woman 2 was born. Asterisk, the idea for Pretty Woman 2 lived quietly in the hearts of fans for years. While the original film wrapped up on a hopeful note, people never stopped wondering what came next. But for decades, no one in Hollywood wanted to touch it. The original was too perfect, too iconic. Making a sequel felt risky. Even Julia Roberts herself said many times, "We already told that story." And Richard Gere? He had moved on to more serious roles, leaving the romantic genre behind. Then, in 2016, something happened. Garry Marshall, the heart and soul behind the original film, passed away. His death hit the film industry hard, but it also did something unexpected. It reminded people of what he created. Not just Pretty Woman, but a legacy of love stories that balanced heart and humor like no other. Quietly, a conversation started. Not about remaking Pretty Woman, but honoring it. Years passed. In secret, a script began to take shape. Not a glossy studio pitch. A personal story, one that asked, what if Vivian and Edward didn't live happily ever after? What if love fades, but the memory of it never dies? This idea drew in producers. But they knew it couldn't happen without the two original stars. And that's when the real challenge began. Getting Julia Roberts to return was nearly impossible. She had avoided sequels her entire career, but something changed when she read the new script. The story wasn't about being young or beautiful anymore. It was about life after the fairy tale, about struggle, about dignity, about real love, older, wiser, but still burning. Julia said yes. But only on one condition. Richard Gere had to be there. Richard Gere took more time. He had left behind the role of Edward Lewis decades ago. But when he read the script, he saw a different Edward, a man full of regret, a man trying to fix the only thing that ever felt real to him, Vivian. That depth pulled him back. He said yes. And suddenly, Pretty Woman 2 became real. But one question remained. Who would direct it? With Garry Marshall gone, it had to be someone who understood his vision. The studio finally turned to someone very close. Garry's own daughter, Kathleen Marshall. Known for her work in Broadway and film choreography, Kathleen had never directed a movie this big. But she had something no one else had, her father's spirit. She didn't want to copy his style. She wanted to continue it. The production was kept secret for months. Filming took place in Los Angeles, New York, and even Venice. Each location was picked to show how far Vivian and Edward had traveled physically and emotionally. Their characters had changed, but the soul of the story stayed the same. A love story, but also a story of second chances. Costume design played a big role too. Vivian's outfits were carefully chosen to reflect her transformation, not flashy, but elegant. She's no longer trying to fit in. She knows who she is. Edward's style also shifted. Less suits, more simplicity. He's no longer hiding behind wealth. Behind the scenes, the emotions ran deep. On set, Julia was often seen holding a small locket that belonged to Garry Marshall. She kept it with her every day of filming, saying it reminded her why she came back. Richard Gere also shared that during a key emotional scene, he felt Garry's presence in the room. Some crew members even paused filming because they were crying off camera, but it wasn't all sadness. The cast bonded quickly, especially with the younger actors joining the story. Rumors suggest that a rising actress plays Vivian's daughter. Character with her own path, full of modern questions about love, freedom, and success. Her dynamic with Vivian adds a new layer of storytelling. How the next generation sees the choices we made. Production wasn't without problems. A major scene had to be rewritten when a key location flooded days before filming. Another delay happened due to health restrictions, pushing the schedule by weeks. But through every challenge, the team pushed forward. They knew they weren't just making a movie. They were honoring a legacy. Julia and Richard both agreed to do only one interview together, and it was powerful. In that interview, Julia said, "We're not giving fans more of the same. We're giving them something deeper, something true." Richard added, "It's not about going back. It's about finishing something we never finished." Even before the trailer dropped, buzz around the film was electric. Critics and fans began to whisper, could this actually be good? Could it even match the original? And when the first images of Vivian in her red dress, updated, modern, but still iconic, were released, the internet went wild. What makes the making of Pretty Woman 2 so special isn't just that it finally happened. It's how it happened, quietly, carefully, with heart, with love. It wasn't made to cash in. It was made to say goodbye to Garry Marshall, to a moment in time, to a version of love we all believed in, and now that goodbye is finally here. But it might also be a new beginning. Asterisk, what happens after the fairy tale ends? Pretty Woman 2 doesn't pick up where we left off with smiles and roses. It asks something deeper. What if love wasn't enough the first time? What if life pulled them apart, and only now, decades later, do they get one last chance? This isn't just a romantic sequel. It's a second chapter that dares to be raw, grown-up, and heartbreakingly real. Here's what we know about the story without spoiling the magic. Asterisk, the film opens not in Beverly Hills, but far from it. Vivian is no longer that wide-eyed dreamer walking the streets in tall boots. She's matured, survived, and built a quiet life filled with purpose. She's a woman who's known both luxury and loneliness and has finally found a balance on her own terms. But something is missing. Or rather, someone. Edward too has changed. Time has softened the sharp lines of his life. The boardrooms, the power deals, the cold walls he used to hide behind, they no longer satisfy him. He's retired now. But that doesn't mean he's at peace. There's a weight he's carried for years. The silence between him and Vivian. A love once so alive, now lost in time. The two haven't spoken in over a decade. What drove them apart? The movie doesn't throw the answer at you. It unravels it slowly, carefully. Through letters that were never sent. Through memories they both carry but never shared. The past creeps into the present, not like a ghost, but like a song you forgot you loved, and then fate pushes them together again, not by some magical accident, but through something real, something painful, even urgent. A shared friend, a lost promise, maybe even a tragedy, something that makes them meet again after all these years. And this time, they're not who they once were. They're older, maybe wiser, maybe not. But they remember. Vivian isn't looking for a rescue, and Edward isn't looking to control. They meet not as savior and saved, but as equals. Two people marked by time, by choices, by things unsaid. Their conversations aren't full of fairy tale lines. They're full of pauses, looks, regrets, questions that hang heavy in the air. The movie explores not just romantic love, but forgiveness, self-respect, the cost of pride. What happens when two people let each other go, not because they stopped loving, but because they were afraid to change? And more importantly, is it ever too late to try again? There's a new character, young, sharp, and full of questions. Some believe she's Vivian's daughter. Others think she's someone else connected to Edward's past. What's clear is her presence challenges both of them. She forces them to look at what they've become and what they still could be. Through her, the story bridges generations. She sees the mistakes they made and wonders if she's walking into the same trap. Her voice brings fresh tension, youth, and truth. And maybe she's the reason they're finally honest with themselves and each other. One of the film's most moving parts is how it uses silence. There are scenes where nothing is said, yet everything is felt. Vivian looking at an old picture, Edward holding a letter in his hands for hours before reading it. These moments don't need dramatic music or big speeches. They speak through emotion. The film doesn't pretend everything can be fixed with one kiss or one apology. It respects the audience's intelligence. Life is messy. Love is not always enough, but sometimes it's still worth the fight. That's the heart of Pretty Woman 2. There's also a deeper theme: legacy. What kind of mark do we leave behind? Not just in the world, but in the hearts of people we once loved? And when we're gone, do our choices still echo in those we leave behind? Throughout the film, there are quiet nods to the original. Not in a flashy way, but in details: a red dress hanging in a closet, a necklace that once snapped open during a laugh, a piano in a hotel lobby. Fans of the first movie will notice these, and they will feel like warm memories rising up from the past. And then, just when you think you know where the story is going, it shifts. The second half of the movie dives into unexpected territory. It challenges Edward and Vivian with something they never faced before: time, not just the past, but the future. What do you do when the one person who still makes your heart beat is also the one you walked away from? The ending, of course, is a closely guarded secret. But insiders say it made cast members cry during the table read. It's not loud or flashy. It's honest. Some are calling it the most emotional final scene since the original's fire. Escape kiss. What makes the story of Pretty Woman 2 special isn't that it brings back beloved characters. It's that it treats them like people, not icons. It lets them age, hurt, grow, and stumble. It reminds us that love doesn't have an expiration date, but it does require courage. This isn't a repeat of the first movie. It's a response to it. The young woman who once asked for a fairy tale now asks for something deeper: truth, peace, and maybe one last chance to believe in something bigger than herself. And the man who once climbed a fire escaped to find her? He's still climbing, but this time, it's within himself. Asterisk, they didn't just return to play roles, they stepped back into a world that once defined their lives. In Pretty Woman 2, Richard Gere and Julia Roberts don't act like Edward and Vivian. They become them again, but this time it's different. Their smiles are slower, their eyes heavier, and their love, no longer wrapped in youth, is deeper, wiser, and more fragile. This section explores the soul of the film, the performances that bring old love back to life, and the unexpected cameos that whisper, "We haven't forgotten." Asterisk, from the very first moment Julia Roberts appears on screen, there's a stillness in her performance that speaks volumes. This isn't the loud, laughing Vivian of Rodeo Drive anymore. It's a woman who has lived a full life, who has seen joy, loss, and maybe even loneliness. Julia doesn't force emotion. She wears it quietly. Her eyes carry memories. Her voice is softer, more grounded. It's in the way she pauses before answering, in the way she smiles without showing her teeth. She's not acting younger, she's honoring the years that passed, and yet there are flickers of the old Vivian when she lets out a quick laugh or delivers a line with that classic sass. But those moments come like sparks in a fire that's been burning low for a long time. Julia walks a careful line, balancing nostalgia with depth. This Vivian isn't looking for a prince. She's looking for peace. And Julia brings that to life with aching grace. Richard Gere's return as Edward Lewis is just as powerful, maybe even more surprising. In the original, Edward was cool, rich, and a little cold, a man hiding from emotion. But in Pretty Woman 2, Richard shows us what happens when a man finally admits he's lonely. His performance isn't grand, it's quiet, controlled, but when he looks at Vivian, there's something behind his eyes. Regret, hope, maybe love that never really died. One standout scene has Edward trying to apologize, not with words, but with a simple gesture. No music, no dialogue. Just Richard Gere sitting in silence, eyes filled with something unsaid, and the audience feels it. That's the power of a performance that trusts stillness more than speech. Their chemistry? It's not youthful anymore. It's not full of flirtation and fire. It's something else. Something deeper. You don't watch two people fall in love, you watch two people realize they never truly stopped. It's raw, tender, and it makes every scene between them feel like a reunion between not just characters but old friends. But it's not just Julia and Richard who shine. A breakout performance comes from a young actress rumored to be playing Vivian's daughter. She's fierce, funny, and not afraid to challenge both her mother and Edward. Her scenes with Julia are electric. She doesn't try to copy Vivian. Instead, she questions her. She brings modern ideas into an old-fashioned love story. She wants answers, and in doing so, she helps both lead characters confront their past choices. This younger character adds layers to the story. She asks the questions fans have had for years. Why didn't Edward and Vivian stay together? What kind of life did they build apart? And her presence forces everyone to face what they've been avoiding. There's also a new male character, a quiet, kind man from Vivian's present life. He's not a threat to Edward, but a mirror. A reminder of the kind of man Edward could have been or still can be. His performance is understated, but full of quiet power. You watch his scenes and wonder who really deserves Vivian now. But the film doesn't just introduce new faces. It honors the old ones, too. One emotional cameo comes from a familiar voice recording left behind by a character we loved from the first film. It's short, but it hits hard. A line spoken in the past, replayed in the present. That reminds everyone how far this story has traveled. And then there's the tribute to Garry Marshall. Though he's no longer with us, his presence is everywhere. There's a scene in the movie where a character walks past a painting in a hotel lobby. If you look closely, you'll see a man in the background, a gentle smile, familiar eyes. It's not a name drop, it's not loud, but it's Garry, and in that moment, you feel the weight of what this film means. It's a love letter to him, to the fans, to the people who never stopped believing in this story. Even the supporting cast delivers beautifully. A hotel manager played by a veteran actor brings warmth and humor in the smallest scenes. A longtime friend of Vivian adds layers to her backstory, revealing the years we never saw. Everyone plays their part like they know they're stepping into something sacred. What's most impressive about the acting in Pretty Woman 2 is that no one's trying to steal the spotlight, not even Julia or Richard. They don't act like stars, they act like people older, wiser, still learning, still healing. It's not about creating magic. It's about honoring it. By the time the credits roll, you don't just remember the performances. You feel them, like echoes from the past, wrapped in new emotions. It's not about who cried or who smiled the most, it's about who made you feel like this story really mattered. Asterisk when the credits rolled. There was silence, then applause, then tears. Pretty Woman 2 didn't just reach the audience. It broke through their walls. Critics came in ready to judge. Fans came in hoping for magic. And what they got was something unexpected. Raw, mature, and heartbreakingly human. This wasn't just a movie comeback. It was an emotional reckoning, and the reactions? They say everything. Asterisk, the early screenings of Pretty Woman 2 were quiet affairs, no loud marketing, no red carpets full of influencers. Just dimly lit theaters filled with people who carried memories of Vivian and Edward from 1990. Some came with excitement. Others with fear, what if this sequel ruined the story they loved? But when the lights came back on, something strange happened. People weren't rushing to post selfies. They were sitting in silence, wiping tears. The first reviews started coming in, and they weren't what the studio expected. Critics weren't calling it romantic escapism or a feel-good return. They were using words like mature, painful, healing, and honest. Reviewers who had once written off the idea of a sequel began comparing it to the best second-act love stories in cinema history. One critic wrote, "This isn't a sequel, it's a love letter to aging hearts." Another said, "Julia Roberts delivers a performance that might be more powerful than the original. She doesn't try to be 22 again. She brings all her years with her and you feel every one of them." Richard Gere also received high praise. Some called his performance a quiet masterpiece. His Edward wasn't flashy anymore. He was slow to speak, haunted by the past, and full of real, visible emotion. One moment in particular where he breaks down alone after a phone call was described by multiple reviewers as Oscar-worthy in its silence. But it wasn't just the stars who earned the applause. The new characters, especially the young woman tied to Vivian's past, surprised everyone. Critics praised her for bringing freshness without disrespecting the original. One major outlet said, She holds her own next to Julia Roberts, and that's no small thing. However, the film didn't receive only glowing praise. Some critics found the pace too slow. Others felt it leaned too heavily on nostalgia. A few questioned whether certain emotional moments were earned or felt forced. But even those reviewers admitted one thing: the film didn't try to be flashy or loud, it tried to be true. And in that honesty, even the flaws became part of its charm, where the movie truly soared. Though was with the fans, longtime lovers of the original took to social media with emotional reactions. Hashtags like hashtag Vivian and Edward, hashtag Pretty Woman 2, and hashtag Julia is back trended globally within hours of the premiere. Posts poured in from women who said the film made them reflect on their own past relationships. From men who admitted they cried especially during the final 10 minutes. And from couples who saw themselves in the older Vivian and Edward, still figuring out what love means when life gets in the way. One viral tweet said, "I didn't expect to cry this hard." It's not the fairy tale anymore, it's real life. And I think I love that even more. Younger fans, many of whom had only seen the original recently on streaming platforms, had their own reactions. They were drawn to the modern themes: freedom, identity, generational pain. They praised the film for showing love without filters, without glam. "It's raw and real," one Gen Z reviewer said. "This isn't a Disney ending. It's an adult beginning." Fan-made tribute videos exploded on YouTube and TikTok. Old clips of Vivian walking down Rodeo Drive mixed with scenes from the new film, accompanied by emotional songs. Rewatch parties of the original surged, with fans now seeing it through a new lens after watching the sequel. Internationally, the response was just as strong. In France, critics called it an unexpected triumph. In Japan, Julia Roberts trended on social media for 3 straight days. In Brazil, a local talk show dedicated an entire segment to the emotional return of Edward and Vivian. Around the globe, people weren't just talking about Pretty Woman 2, they were feeling it. And then came the awards talk. Early buzz has begun building around Julia Roberts possibly receiving her second Oscar nomination. Some say it's her most vulnerable performance in 2 decades. Richard Gere's name is also being mentioned, especially for supporting actor. But beyond awards, it's the audience that matters. And this time, the audience didn't just approve. They embraced it. One of the most touching stories came from a woman who shared that her mother took her to see Pretty Woman in 1990, and now she took her mother to see the sequel. "We both cried," she wrote. "Not because it was sad, but because it reminded us that time passes, but real love never dies." That's the kind of reaction no critic can measure. In the end, Pretty Woman 2 didn't try to be bigger or flashier than the first. It didn't pretend to fix the past. It simply told the truth that love is messy, aging is real, and sometimes the second hello is harder than the first goodbye. Sometimes. The real story isn't what plays on screen, it's what happens behind the scenes. Pretty Woman 2 may look polished and effortless, but it was built on quiet promises, secret tributes, and emotional choices that fans never saw coming. From Julia's personal condition for returning, to hidden details honoring Garry Marshall's memory, these facts reveal how deeply this sequel was crafted from love, loss, and legacy. Here are the untold truths you didn't know, but will never forget. Julia Roberts had one powerful condition before saying yes before signing on to Pretty Woman 2. Julia Roberts turned down multiple sequel offers over the years. But when this final script arrived, she gave one heartfelt condition: the story must honor real aging. No digital de-aging. No fake glam. She wanted Vivian to be older, wiser, and proud of it. She said, "Let her wrinkles speak." And the filmmakers listened. What we see on screen is not just Vivian but Julia, fully present and unfiltered. Richard Gere's return was sparked by a lost letter. Richard Gere originally declined the role until he was shown a handwritten letter Garry Marshall once wrote. To him, the letter, never mailed, talked about what Edward could become if given another shot. The studio had kept it hidden for years. When Gere read it, he reportedly stayed quiet for a full minute, then simply nodded. That was the moment Edward Lewis returned. Garry Marshall is in the film. Quietly, though the beloved director passed away in 2016, his spirit lives inside the film. In one quiet scene, a character walks past a piano in a hotel lounge. On top of that piano is a framed black and white photo of Garry himself, smiling. No music swells, no one mentions it. But the crew called it the heartbeat cameo. Only sharp-eyed fans will notice. The red dress was almost cut until Julia stepped in one of the most iconic symbols from the original film is Vivian's red gown from the opera scene. A modern version of the dress was planned for a flashback, but the writers considered cutting it, fearing it would be too on the nose. Julia Roberts disagreed. She said, "It's not about the dress. It's about what it meant." She finally felt worthy. The scene stayed, and the red returns more meaningful than ever. One scene took 12 takes because the actors kept crying. There's a scene late in the film, no spoilers, where Edward says something to Vivian that he never could say 30 years ago. The scene is quiet, only a few lines. But it took 12 takes because Julia and Richard kept breaking down in tears. Not because of acting, but because, as Julia put it, we weren't just finishing a movie. We were finishing a chapter of our lives. The young actress cast as Vivian's daughter was a fan. The breakout young star playing Vivian's daughter wasn't originally on the casting list. She sent in a self-taped audition wearing a thrifted version of Vivian's original outfit, boots, blazer, the works. She said she grew up watching Pretty Woman with her mom and wanted to honor it. The casting team was so moved they flew her in immediately. When she met Julia, they both cried. The film includes a line from the original script that was cut in 1990. There's one line Vivian says in Pretty Woman, too simple, soft and full of meaning. "I was always waiting for you to come back." That line wasn't new. It was from the original 1990 draft, cut before filming began. Garry Marshall had scribbled a note beside it. "Too sad. Maybe save it one day." That day finally came 35 years later. Easter eggs are hidden throughout the film. Fans of the original will spot hidden gems in nearly every scene. A jewelry box that snaps shut. A limo parked in the exact alley where Edward first met Vivian. A street performer playing King of Wishful Thinking on guitar. Even the hotel doorman from the first film returns in a short, moving scene, this time as a retiree offering one last word of advice to Edward. Director left a chair empty on set for every shoot. Kathleen Marshall, daughter of Garry Marshall and director of this sequel, kept one chair on every set marked GM. It was never used. No one sat in it. But it was always there, whether they were filming in Los Angeles, New York, or Venice. Cast and crew say it felt like Garry was watching. Some even claim they felt his energy during filming. The ending was rewritten 3 times, and the final version was Julia's idea. The original ending of Pretty Woman 2 was more dramatic, even tragic. The second version was too light. Julia Roberts herself proposed a rewrite that focused on quiet forgiveness, not big declarations. She said, "Vivian doesn't need to be rescued. She just needs to be seen." The director agreed. And, the ending we now have gentle, bittersweet, unforgettable was born from that idea. In a world of sequels made just for money, Pretty Woman 2 stands apart. Every frame is full of care, every moment shaped by memory. These hidden facts prove that this wasn't just another movie, it was a farewell letter to youth, a celebration of growth, and a reminder that some stories are too powerful to stay in the past. It's not just about whether the sequel is good or bad. The real question is, did it need to exist? In a world full of pointless remakes and lazy reboots, Pretty Woman 2 walks in quietly, with its head bowed, its heart full, and one hope that maybe, just maybe, there's still space for a love story that dares to grow old with us. So, is it worth watching? Let's take one last honest look. If you're going into Pretty Woman 2 expecting the charm and fast-paced magic of the original, you might be surprised. This is not the same kind of story. It's not filled with cheeky banter, makeover montages, or shopping sprees on Rodeo Drive. It doesn't wink at you. It doesn't sing out loud, it whispers, it waits. And it hurts in the most beautiful way, because this is not a story about falling in love. It's about what happens after the fairy tale, after time has passed, after people have changed. And in that way, it's more honest than the first film ever was. Is it slow? Yes, intentionally so. It takes its time like real healing does. Some may say it lacks drama or energy, but that's because it trades those things for depth. It wants you to feel, not escape. To reflect, not fantasize. It's not trying to entertain your eyes, it's trying to speak to your heart. Julia Roberts gives a performance that doesn't scream, it aches. She shows us what it looks like when someone carries years of questions, of silence, of choices that can't be undone. And Richard Gere's Edward, he's not the prince climbing the fire escape anymore. He's the man who left, who remembers, and who finally comes back not to save, but to apologize. And somehow, that's even more powerful. The film also speaks to a generation of viewers who have grown older with these characters. Many of us were kids or teens when we first met Vivian and Edward. Now, watching them face the weight of lost time feels personal. It hits where we live. In the spaces between our own regrets and second chances, for younger audiences, it might be a slower burn. But even they will find truth in the daughter's journey, the need to understand where you come from, what love really looks like, and what it costs to truly let someone in. Visually, the movie is soft and elegant. There's no rush, no glittery distraction. It knows that the most powerful scenes are the quiet ones, when two people sit in silence and still say everything. The soundtrack isn't packed with hits, but every song chosen carries weight. There's a haunting piano theme that plays throughout the film. Simple, repetitive, and every time it plays, it feels like a memory returning. A gentle reminder that this story isn't just being told, it's being closed, and that's really what Pretty Woman 2 is. Closure. It's not trying to begin a new franchise or set up a trilogy. It's not trying to capitalize on nostalgia. It's trying to finish something that was left open for 35 years, not just for the characters, but for us. Yes, there are a few flaws. Some scenes feel stretched. A few emotional beats may not land for everyone, but the intention behind it all is pure. And in today's Hollywood, that's rare. So is it worth watching? If you believe in storytelling that grows with you. Yes, if you've ever looked back and wondered, what if? Yes, if you need a reminder that love is not just found in grand gestures, but in quiet forgiveness. Absolutely yes, because Pretty Woman 2 doesn't just answer what happened next. It gives us something we didn't know we needed. The truth that love doesn't always look like it did in the beginning, but if it's real, it can survive the years, the distance, and even the silence, and that is worth everything. Some movies stay with you for a weekend, others stay with you for a lifetime. Pretty Woman wasn't just a romantic comedy, it became part of our culture, our conversations, even our dreams. And now, after 35 years, Pretty Woman 2 doesn't just continue the story, it reminds us why we ever cared. This isn't just about Vivian and Edward. It's about all of us, how we change, how we love, and how some stories never really end. When Pretty Woman first came out in 1990, it was seen as a modern fairy tale Cinderella story for a new generation. But over time, it became more than that. Vivian wasn't just a character, she was a symbol of second chances, of finding your worth, of walking into rooms that once told you you didn't belong and smiling anyway. And Edward? He was the cold man who had everything but still felt empty, until someone showed him that love couldn't be bought, that opening your heart was riskier and richer than any business deal. These weren't just characters. They were mirrors for the parts of us we don't always talk about, and that's why people never let the story go. Through the years, Pretty Woman became a comfort film, a late-night escape, a movie passed down from mothers to daughters, a movie rewatched during heartbreak, during new love, during lonely moments. It was safe, familiar. It made us feel seen, even in our flaws. That's what made Pretty Woman 2 such a risk, can such a gift, because when you revisit a story that meant so much to so many, you're not just making a sequel. You're opening a wound. and hoping that this time healing comes with it. Pretty Woman 2 doesn't try to erase what came before. It embraces it. It doesn't give us perfect endings. It gives us earned ones. It doesn't pretend that time hasn't passed. It honors the fact that it has. That's why the emotional legacy of this franchise is so strong. Because it grows with its audience. Young women once watched Vivian with hope. Maybe love could really change everything. Now, those same women are older, wiser. They've had their hearts broken. They've walked away from things they thought they couldn't live without. And when they watch Vivian now, they don't just see a dream, they see truth. Edward, too, speaks differently now. In his silence, his tired eyes, his hesitant voice, we see our fathers, our former selves, our forgotten mistakes. We see how love isn't loud anymore. It's in showing up and staying. In saying the words we were once too proud to say. The legacy of Pretty Woman isn't just romantic. It's emotional, cultural, personal. It taught us that self-worth doesn't come from money or beauty or status. It comes from knowing who you are and daring to be that person in a world that tells you to be something else. It taught us that love isn't perfect, that it shows up in messy, surprising ways, that sometimes the most powerful thing someone can do isn't to save you, but to see you. And now, 35 years later, Pretty Woman 2 reminds us of something even more powerful. That love, like people, doesn't have to be flawless to be real. It just has to last. Hollywood is full of love stories, but only a few become legends. Pretty Woman didn't just change Julia Roberts' career, it changed the entire industry. It redefined the romantic comedy, flipped the script on fairy tales, and proved that heart could beat louder than spectacle. Now, Pretty Woman 2 arrives in a different world, older, noisier, colder, and yet it dares to do the same thing again. Remind Hollywood what love stories are really about. Back in 1990, when Pretty Woman first premiered, Hollywood wasn't exactly kind to romantic comedies. Studios believed big action films made money. Romance? That was women's stuff. Secondary, safe, but then came Vivian Ward standing in heels, laughing freely, and rewriting the rules. The original film was a game-changer. It showed that a romantic story could be smart, funny, and financially massive. It broke box office records. Julia Roberts became a global icon. And suddenly, every studio wanted their own fairy tale with charm, edge, and heart. Pretty Woman opened the door for movies like Notting Hill, The Proposal, 10 Things I Hate About You, and dozens more. But here's what many people forget. Pretty Woman wasn't supposed to be sweet. The original script was dark, gritty, and tragic. It wasn't until Garry Marshall stepped in that it transformed into a modern fairy tale, one where love didn't just feel magical, it felt possible. That shift didn't just save the movie, it created a new language in film. A mix of humor, heartache, glamour, and redemption. Fast forward 35 years, and Hollywood has changed again. Now it's all superheroes, reboots, and endless franchises. Romance? Pushed to streaming platforms or buried in small budgets. Real human connection has taken a backseat to explosions, algorithms, and endless IP content. And that's where Pretty Woman 2 walks back in quietly, gracefully, and with something to say. It doesn't follow trends. It doesn't try to go viral. It doesn't care about action scenes or cliffhangers. What it cares about is truth. Two people, their scars, their silence, their second chance. Their scars, their silence, their second chance. In doing so, it challenges everything today's Hollywood has come to accept, because Pretty Woman 2 proves that mature storytelling still matters. That romance isn't outdated, it's essential. That audiences still crave emotion that isn't loud but honest. That we still want to see characters grow, stumble, and try again, not with CGI or stunts, but with words, looks, and quiet forgiveness. It's not just a sequel, it's a protest, a gentle, beautiful rebellion against the idea that older actors can't lead love stories, against the belief that everything needs to be fast and shiny, against the idea that love stops being interesting after youth fades. Julia Roberts and Richard Gere aren't trying to sell you a fantasy anymore. They're showing you something better, a reflection of what real love looks like when it's Been tested by time, by pride, by choices never unmade. That's rare in today's cinema. And it's powerful. The film's success, both emotionally and financially, has already sent signals across the industry. Executives are noticing. Writers are being asked to explore second-chance love stories. Studios are reconsidering what kinds of films they greenlight. In a quiet way, Pretty Woman 2 is once again changing the rules, and maybe that's the biggest legacy of all, because sometimes it only takes one story told with honesty, heart, and a little courage to remind an entire industry of what really matters. Asterisk, not every story ends with a kiss. And not every love survives the years. But sometimes the lessons we learn from what could have been stay with us far longer than any fairy tale ever could. Pretty Woman 2 isn't just about love, it's about time. About the moments we waste, the words we never say, and the people we never stop loving. This story doesn't just entertain. It holds a mirror to the most fragile parts of us. Here's what it quietly teaches if you're willing to listen. Asterisk, at its core, Pretty Woman 2 is not about getting back together. It's about looking back and realizing where it all went wrong. It's about silence that lasted too long. About phone calls never made. About love that slipped through our fingers not because it wasn't real, but because we were too scared to fight for it. Vivian and Edward don't return as lovers still glowing with hope. They return as strangers who once knew each other too well. Their reunion isn't built on sparks, it's built on pauses, on wait, on everything they didn't do. And that's what makes it hurt so beautifully. The film gently reminds us that love doesn't die when two people walk away. It lingers in the clothes you never threw out, the music you still avoid, the streets you don't walk down anymore. Time doesn't erase real connection, it only buries it. Until something or someone digs it back up. And when it does, you face it. You either run again or finally choose to stay. One of the most haunting truths the movie shows is that sometimes the people we hurt the most are the ones we love the most. And healing that, it's not easy. It takes more than an apology. It takes understanding. It takes remembering not just the good moments, but the pain, too. Vivian's journey teaches us that you don't have to become who someone else wants you to be. You just have to be proud of who you've become. And Edward's story? It shows us that pride is a lonely place to live. That the walls we build to protect ourselves from pain often become prisons that keep out love. The film doesn't offer easy answers. It doesn't promise that everything can be fixed. But it does ask one quiet question. If you had the chance to say what was left unsaid, would you take it? That's the power of this story. It doesn't yell, it doesn't preach, it whispers. It reaches into the regrets you thought were forgotten and places a gentle hand on them. It says, you're not alone. We've all made mistakes. But maybe, just maybe, there's still time for peace. For those who have ever let someone walk away because they were too afraid. This movie will feel like a letter you never mailed, for those who've loved deeply and lost without closure. This film will feel like a mirror held up to your past, and for those still waiting for someone to come back not with flowers, but with truth. This story will feel like an answer. Pretty Woman 2 isn't about rewriting the ending. It's about accepting it and finding beauty in the scars love leaves behind. Because sometimes the most powerful love story isn't the one that begins with once upon a time, but the one that finally says, I'm sorry, I remember. I still care. That's not a fantasy, that's real life, and that's what makes this story unforgettable.